Well, we're going to do some editing. This is one of the type topics we'll do. We'll talk about opening images in Photoshop. You see my Lightroom desktop here because I'll open the image from Lightroom to get them into Photoshop. You could do this from Bridge or any other software you have, but this is the way Lightroom works. If I select an image, and you'll see this is a raw image, I've got an edited PSD version, which is a Photoshop file format next to it, as I have other ones down here. I'll open the raw image first to show you the difference, some of the differences. The way you open the file simply is click on the image you want, right-click on the image, and then go down Edit in Photoshop. Okay, so this is going to open up this raw file in Photoshop directly, just as without any fuss. I've got it open. It's a background image with a lock on it. I can go on and start my editing processes now. Okay, that's one easy thing. But what if I do the same thing? I'm going to go to do the same thing now. Going back down Lightroom. Instead of using this and editing a raw DNG file, which has no edits on it. I didn't do any editing in this file in Lightroom. But suppose I did do some editing in Lightroom. I'm going to take this DNG file, okay, and go to Basic and just say Auto, okay. So now this file has some edits on it, okay. It's been edited. If I do the same thing now to that file, I go back and I say, okay, Edit in Adobe Photoshop. It opened it up in Photoshop with the edits, okay. Now let me do one thing slightly different from that, okay. Let me go back to this file here. Let me take this, instead of this raw file with edits on it, let's take a PSD file, okay, and do the same thing. I'm going to click on that PSD file and say Edit in Photoshop. Now this time it came up with a different question. It asked me now, do I want to edit the original file being a PSD file? If I choose original file, it'll open up this file here with all the layers and all the adjustments that I did before when I saved the file in Photoshop. If I say I want to copy this file, it'll take this particular file, it'll flatten all those adjustments and layers that we did in Photoshop before and just gave me the file itself. Or if I say edit a copy of this file with any Lightroom adjustments that I may have done after the fact in Lightroom. What I typically use would be this particular here, the edit copy with Lightroom adjustments is my typical choice of the way I would open the file, unless I want to go back and do some more editing on an old PSD file that has layers on it. So let me just show you how that might work. Let me show you a PSD file that I know has layers. I believe still has layers on it. I'll open this file down here, Edit in Adobe Photoshop. And instead of saying copy with Lightroom adjustments, I'm going to say the original. This file now will open in Photoshop. You can see on the right hand side all the layers that I used to edit this file originally. So it opened as it did when I saved it in Photoshop. I saved it with all these layers. It reopens now. If I did the original, it reopens with those layers. If I did that same file though, this same file here, and did what I said here, edit in Photoshop, but instead of saying give me the original, I say, hey, give me a copy of this file with Lightroom adjustments, or just edit a copy. Either one in this case is going to be the same. I haven't done any Lightroom adjustments to this file, but let me say, let's just say edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. It'll open that file again, but this time you'll notice all the layers are gone. It's flattened the file and given me the edited file without the adjustments on it. Okay, you can see the difference there. So it does matter which one you choose. Typically, if you're editing a flat file that doesn't have a lot of layers on it and things like that, you would choose edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments in it. Now you can edit more than one copy at a time. Okay. So more than one file at a time. So let's say, for example, I wanted to edit this file here, the one I just opened, and I wanted to also edit this particular file over here, because maybe I wanted to add something to it, or maybe I wanted a sky file. Let's say I wanted to open this building file here, but I wanted to toy around with a different sky in it. I could hold down the Command or Control key. Okay, Command or Control, depending. Command is Mac, Control is Windows. So if I hit the Control key or Command key, I now have two files selected. I could have 10 files selected if I wanted to. I'll do that. I'll select another sky picture. Now I've got 3 files selected. If I now right click on any one of these files and say Edit in Photoshop, I've got a couple of choices. If I say Edit in Photoshop, it'll open each file up as a separate file in Photoshop. If I say Edit as layers in Photoshop, it'll stack these on top of each other. So let's just do this one first, Edit in Photoshop. These 3 files. It's going to ask me the same question, and I want to open them with Lightroom adjustments. I'll say yes. And that is typically what I do. And now we should be hopefully opening them. Okay, there they go. Here are the 3 files. There's one file, there's a second file, and there's a third file. And I can go from there by copying files over and moving them onto the other files and things like that. But this is opening files. So we open those 3 files as separate files. Okay. So what we'll do now is close these off, and we'll open them as layers to show you the difference. Okay. I could have done the same thing we did before. I have those 3 files selected, except this time I will right click on it. I'll say Edit in. This time I'll say Open as layers in Photoshop. So there's 3 files open like they did before, except instead of opening as separate files like they did before in the top, you'll notice they open as 3 different layers stacked on top of each other. So now we've got the same files, but they're stacked on top of each other's layers. Okay? Alright, so that's the difference between those 2 ways of opening files. I will get out of here. Don't save it. Alright, so you can open files as a single file. You can open up multiple files in Photoshop. Now, there's another way of opening files here. Let's just say I open a file. I've done some edits on this file here. This file here, we did some edits. Let's go back over and we can see we did those edits on them. This is the one we did before. If I open this file here, like we did before, Edit in Photoshop, I'm opening up just the file just like we did before. You'll notice that the file's sitting here. The edits are there because if you remember, the original file was a lot darker than that. If I go back and I take this file here and I reset that file, you can see it was a lot different. Okay, so I'm going to go back to auto settings the way it is there. So the original file was a lot darker than that. So this did open the file with the edits in it. Okay, it's baked in. If I wanted to do something, for example, like do some more editing on the file, I could do that now. If I opened it in Adobe Camera Raw, I could edit it. But the point is, I can't go back to Lightroom right now. I have what I have, and I have to go forward from this standpoint. Okay. If I decided during this editing process I should have started off with maybe some different settings in Lightroom, then, and this is something I don't do very often, but I could have opened this file as a smart object. So going back to the library module here, you'll notice, going back, let me show you develop, you notice the slider positions are all different here, okay? If instead of opening it the way I just did, I opened it as edit in Adobe Photoshop, but open as a smart object, okay? Instead of opening, just plain opening it, I will now open this thing as a smart object, okay? What it does then is it brings in with it, you can see it's a smart object because it's got the little logo here in the bottom right corner. And the way you open a smart object is to double click on the smart object. So I'll double click on this smart object and open it. Now it opens up with the sliders all set. And so the nice thing with the smart object is if I want to go back and re-edit the image in Lightroom, I can now essentially do it. Yes, this is Adobe Camera Raw here. It's not Lightroom, but it's the same settings in Adobe Camera Raw. And now I can decide that, in fact, I need to make some different adjustments to this image to make it a little bit better as a starting point. Maybe I don't think I did it right enough in. Okay, so now I've got something I can work a little bit with and save it, and now it'll save those changes I did in Adobe Camera Raw, and so opening in a smart object brings over the ability to redo your Lightroom edits. Okay, now the difference here that is sometimes confusing is if I instead of double clicking on this particular icon here, I went to Filter and opened Camera Raw this way. Okay, it enters here with everything zeroed out. By not clicking on the smart object, it didn't open as a smart object. It opened as a regular object, regular layer with everything. I can still do the edits here. I can still do whatever I want to do, but it added these particular edits that I did now with Adobe Camera Raw, which I just understood. It added it down below here to the original smart object. So now I have a smart object here, and these Adobe filter, the changes I made just recently are right here. So that's the difference between opening something as a smart object and not opening as a smart object. It's a dumb object, I guess. I don't normally use the smart object option. I'm not sure exactly why I would want to use that, but there must be reasons to do that. So opening as a stack. Let's go in the final way to do it. Let's go back to Photoshop. Suppose I'm in Photoshop here, and I want to open a file. Right? I can just go to File, Open. Right? That would open a file like you would expect it to open a file by opening up my file manager, and I'd have to find the file I wanted to open, and then go open the file. The danger here is if you're using Lightroom, for heaven's sakes, don't go into where you keep all your pictures. Okay, these are my picture folders in Lightroom. If I go through here now and I start opening up and editing pictures that are in my Lightroom catalog, Lightroom won't know that I'm doing this. So it's not going to enjoy me essentially opening pictures up that I shouldn't be. If I do some edits on this picture, Lightroom won't get these edits. So if you're using Lightroom, open from Lightroom is my point. The other thing you can do is open. You can browse in Bridge. I don't have Bridge. I don't use it. Opening smart objects. If the object if you want to open it as a smart object, you can do that. Or open recents. These are files we've opened recently. So I can open a file that maybe we've opened recently, like one of the ones we just did. And so that's the sky picture we just did. Here it is. It opened in Camera Raw, this one, because it was a RAW file. That's why you see this in Camera Raw. If I wanted to open this now, I'd have to click the open key here, and now it'll open in Photoshop. Okay, now it's open in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, if I open a RAW file, it'll directly, without going through Lightroom, it'll go right into Adobe Camera Raw, and then I'll have to click Open to get it. Okay, so that's Open Recents. And the other thing you can do is you can also stack, like you did in Lightroom when you had several images open. If I go to File, Scripts, and load files into Stack, what it allows me to do now is I'm able to come across, browse for the files I want to open. Say I want to open these images here as a stack. In other words, layers. I'll say yes. I want to add open files. Okay, I'll do that. Let's see, browse. Yes, I'll go that way. It's adding the files that I already had open in here. So now I'm going to create a stack of 5 images, and hit it that way. You're going to see one stack now being built using this script with all these files in it. As the little icon spins, it'll start building the stack over here. Okay, so you can open them as a stack directly in Lightroom if you like. Well, I hope that helps. There's various ways to open files in Lightroom. Hopefully that's helpful.